In 1994, Lieutenant Dan was just another role for Gary Sinise. Then, the letters started coming in. Wounded veterans saw themselves in his character. They shared their darkest moments, their pain, their hope. For Sinise, it wasn't just acting anymore. It was a calling. Now, after raising $400 million for veterans and playing 570 shows at military bases, he's finally telling the story of how one role gave him a mission he never expected. Gary Sinise was born on March 17, 1955, in Blue Island, Illinois. His father, Robert L. Sinise, worked as a film editor, so storytelling was always part of his world. His family background was a mix of Italian, English, Scottish, Irish, French, German, and Swedish roots. When he was young, they moved to Highland Park, Illinois, where he spent most of his childhood. But school was never his strong suit. He struggled to focus, always lost in his own thoughts. Teachers saw him as a kid who didn't pay attention. Expulsion was a constant risk, but his family never stopped supporting him. In 1971, when he was 16, everything changed. He was standing in a school hallway with his friends from a rock band when a drama teacher walked by. The school was putting on West Side Story and needed more people to audition. Gary wasn't interested at first, but then he noticed something. There were a lot of girls in the theater program. That was enough to get him to try out. He landed the role of Pepe, a minor character with only 2 lines. It didn't seem important, but something happened on the final night of the performance. As the cast took their curtain call, he felt a rush of excitement like never before. The energy of the audience, the feeling of being on stage, it all clicked. For the first time in his life, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. After that, acting became everything. He didn't just see it as a hobby, it was his purpose. But school was still a challenge, and he didn't graduate on time. In 1974, after finally earning enough credits, he and 2 friends, Terry Kinney and Jeff Perry, took a bold step. They started their own theater company. They named it Steppenwolf, inspired by the novel by Hermann Hesse. Their first production, And Miss Reardon Drinks a Little, took place in a church basement in January 1974. The space was small, the resources were limited, but their passion was unstoppable. By 1976, Steppenwolf had grown. More actors joined, including John Malkovich and Laurie Metcalf. They weren't just another small theater group anymore. Their productions gained attention, and soon, Steppenwolf became one of the most respected theater companies in the country. But Gary wasn't just performing, he was also directing. His biggest breakthrough came in 1982 with True West, a play by Sam Shepard. He directed it and starred in it alongside Malkovich. The play was raw and intense. Critics praised it, and audiences were hooked. The production won him an Obie Award, proving he wasn't just another aspiring actor. He was a force in the theater world. That moment changed his career. More opportunities came, and he started moving between theater and film. Gary Sinise didn't follow the usual Hollywood path. He built his career step by step, starting in theater before making his way to film. In 1988, he took a bold step by directing Miles from Home, his first major film. The story followed 2 brothers, played by Richard Gere and Kevin Anderson, who set fire to their family farm instead of losing it to foreclosure. They became outlaws, robbing banks and turning into folk heroes. The film was inspired by a real farm that Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev visited in 1959. That historical connection gave the story an extra layer of depth. Sinise brought his theater background into the project. Many actors from the Steppenwolf Theater Company, which he co-founded, were involved, including Laurie Metcalf and John Malkovich. The film was shot entirely in Iowa, keeping it grounded in reality. One of the biggest challenges was filming a massive fire scene, something Sinise had never done before. He later described it as a crash course in handling large-scale special effects. The movie made it to the 1988 Cannes Film Festival and got some critical attention, but it struggled at the box office. Even so, it proved that Sinise had a strong eye for storytelling. Instead of chasing big studio projects, he focused on films that meant something to him. In 1992, Sinise took on his first major acting role in A Midnight Clear, a World War II drama directed by Keith Gordon. The film told the story of an American intelligence unit during the Battle of the Bulge. They encountered a German platoon that wanted to surrender, leading to an intense psychological standoff. Sinise played Vance Mother Wilkins, a soldier who began unraveling after receiving tragic news from home. His performance was raw and deeply personal. His father had served in Korea, and he had several relatives who were World War II veterans. That personal connection made the role even more powerful. The film stood out from typical war movies. It wasn't about big battles or action scenes. It was about the emotional toll of war. Critics praised its anti-war message and strong performances. The movie earned an 88% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and was recognized for its unique approach. It didn't become a blockbuster, but it proved that Sinise had real depth as an actor. That same year, he directed and starred in Of Mice and Men, based on John Steinbeck's classic novel. He played George Milton, a man trying to protect his mentally disabled friend Lenny, played by John Malkovich. Sinise had already directed the story on stage at Steppenwolf, so he knew exactly how he wanted to bring it to the screen. Critics praised the film for its emotional weight and faithful adaptation. Sinise's portrayal of George showed quiet strength and deep sadness, while Malkovich's performance as Lenny was heartbreaking. The film captured the harsh reality of Depression-era America without losing the personal connection between the characters. It didn't make huge numbers at the box office, but it became one of the most respected literary adaptations in film history. More importantly, it reinforced what Sinise had been showing for years. He wasn't interested in shallow storytelling. He wanted to make films that lasted. Then came Forrest Gump in 1994, the film that made him a household name. Playing Lieutenant Dan Taylor, Sinise delivered a performance that stuck with audiences. Gary Sinise's performance as Lieutenant Dan Taylor in Forrest Gump is one of the most powerful in film history. Lieutenant Dan is a Vietnam War veteran who comes from a long line of soldiers. He believes his destiny is to die in battle, just like his ancestors. But when Forrest Gump pulls him from the battlefield during an ambush, everything changes. Lieutenant Dan loses both his legs. Instead of dying as a hero, he is left feeling broken and without purpose. The war ends, but his personal battle is just beginning. Sinise brought something real to the role. Lieutenant Dan's anger, his self-destruction, and his slow path to healing felt honest, because they reflected what many wounded veterans go through. He pushes Forrest away. He drinks heavily. He is filled with rage at the world and at himself. But over time, his story shifts. He partners with Forrest in the shrimping business. He invests in companies like Apple. He gets prosthetic legs and even walks at Forrest's wedding. His journey is about more than survival. It's about finding a new purpose when everything seems lost. To prepare for the role, Sinise met with real amputees and veterans. He wanted to understand their experiences firsthand. That research shaped his performance, making it one of the most realistic portrayals of a wounded soldier ever seen on screen. But the film needed more than just great acting. The visual effects used to remove Sinise's legs were groundbreaking for 1994. Industrial Light and Magic used blue stockings to digitally erase them. Some scenes were filmed with hidden cutouts in furniture. The CGI was so realistic that many people believed the actor himself was an amputee. Even Sinise was shocked when he saw the final version. His performance earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor in 1995. Critics praised his ability to capture both the physical and emotional pain of his character. But the impact of his role went beyond awards. Lieutenant Dan became a symbol for wounded veterans. Hollywood rarely showed disabled veterans as more than tragic figures. Sinise's performance changed that. Lieutenant Dan was angry and lost, but he also found hope. He proved that life could move forward. Surprisingly, Sinise almost didn't take the role. At the time, he was mostly a stage actor. He wasn't sure if he could do justice to such a demanding character. But Tom Hanks encouraged him to fully commit. Hanks saw the potential for something special. Sinise took the leap, and it changed his life. When Forrest Gump was released in 1994, Gary Sinise had no idea how much his role as Lieutenant Dan Taylor would change his life. Almost immediately, letters and phone calls started coming in. Vietnam veterans, many of them amputees or struggling with the emotional scars of war, felt a deep connection to the character. Lieutenant Dan's journey, from anger and despair to acceptance and healing, felt personal. Some veterans shared their lowest moments. Others talked about rebuilding their lives. Many simply said that watching Lieutenant Dan on screen made them feel seen. Sinise never expected this kind of response. He later said that playing lt Dan was just another role at first, but as the messages kept coming, he realized the character meant something much bigger. Veterans saw their own struggles reflected in Lieutenant Dan. Some said his story gave them hope. Others said it reminded them of a friend they had lost. Sinise started to understand that this wasn't just about a movie. It was about real people who had sacrificed everything. That same year, in August 1994, Sinise was invited to the Disabled American Veterans (DAV) National Convention in Chicago. When he stepped onto the stage, more than 2,000 wounded veterans were waiting for him. The moment they saw him, the room erupted in applause. These were men who had fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Many had lost limbs. Many had struggled for years to be recognized. And now, they were cheering for an actor who had brought their experiences to life. That night, DAV presented Sinise with the National Commander's Award. The inscription on the award thanked him for bringing national attention to the sacrifices of disabled veterans. He later called this moment life-changing. He had never served in the military. He had never experienced war. But now, standing in front of these men, he felt a new sense of purpose. After that night, Sinise stayed connected to DAV. He attended events. He spoke at gatherings. He supported their efforts to help wounded veterans. Over the years, he became involved in projects like the American Veterans Disabled for Life Memorial in Washington, D.C., which was completed in 2014. His work didn't stop there. Playing Lieutenant Dan had shown him something important. A movie could do more than just entertain people. It could open their eyes. It could make them care. For Sinise, the story of Lieutenant Dan wasn't just about the past. It was about the real veterans still fighting battles long after the war had ended. And he knew he couldn't walk away from that. In 2011, he took that commitment even further by creating the Gary Sinise Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping veterans, first responders, and their families. The foundation's mission is clear. It provides support for those who have served their country, especially those dealing with severe injuries, post-traumatic stress, and traumatic brain injuries. One of its most important projects is the Avalon Network, launched in 2021 to help veterans and first responders suffering from the invisible wounds of war. With 20 treatment sites across the country, the network provides specialized care for post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries. It was made possible by a $40 million donation from Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank, co-founders of the Home Depot. They named it after Avalon, the legendary island where King Arthur went to heal after battle. That name was no accident. The goal was to create a place of recovery and hope for those who have sacrificed so much. Since its launch, the foundation has raised over $400 million to fund its programs. By 2021, it had already passed $300 million, with support coming from individual donors, corporate sponsors, and philanthropic contributions. That funding has led to real, life-changing results. The foundation has built 81 specially adapted smart homes for severely injured veterans, allowing them to live with independence and dignity. It has provided over 1 million meals to military personnel and first responders. And through the lt.Dan Band, Sinise's musical group, it has hosted more than 500 concerts to boost morale for service members and their families. One of its most impactful programs is RISE, which stands for Restoring Independence Supporting Empowerment. This initiative focuses on building mortgage-free smart homes for severely wounded veterans. These homes are custom-designed to fit the needs of each individual, featuring wheelchair accessibility, voice-activated technology, and other adaptive features that make daily life easier. Beyond housing, RISE also provides home modifications, mobility devices, and adapted vehicles to help injured veterans regain their independence. The foundation also reaches out to families who have lost a loved one in military service. Snowball Express is one of its most heartfelt programs, offering support to children of fallen heroes. Every year, it brings Gold Star families together for special events, including an all-expenses-paid trip to Disney World in December. For many of these families, the holiday season is the hardest time of year. Snowball Express gives them a place to heal, connect, and remember that they are not alone. The Gary Sinise Foundation is known for more than just its programs. It is recognized for how efficiently it operates. In 2018, nearly 90% of every dollar donated went directly to programs that support veterans and first responders. This level of transparency has earned the foundation top ratings from charity watchdogs. Moreover, when he began visiting troops through USO tours in the early 2000s, he kept hearing the same thing. They didn't call him Gary, they called him Lieutenant Dan. That bond gave him an idea. In 2003, Sinise teamed up with composer Kimo Williams to form the lt.Dan Band, a group that would bring live music to those who needed it most. What started as a casual jam session in Chicago quickly became something bigger when Sinise suggested taking the band on tour. In February 2004, they played their first official show for service members stationed in Korea, Singapore, and Diego Garcia. It was meant to be a one-time thing, but the impact was undeniable. The energy in the crowd, the way the music lifted spirits, the gratitude from the troops, it was all too powerful to ignore. From that moment on, the lt.Dan Band became more than just a musical act. It became a mission. Over the next 2 decades, they performed more than 570 shows around the world, playing at military bases, hospitals, and charity events. They maintained a busy schedule, averaging 30 to 40 performances each year, many of them part of USO tours or military resilience programs. The band's set list was designed to be as inclusive as possible, covering everything from rock and pop to Motown, country, and even Disney classics. No matter where they played, the goal was always the same: bring joy, boost morale, and remind service members they weren't forgotten. One of their most memorable performances came in 2024 at Fort Knox, marking their 570th show. That night, Sinise dedicated songs to the men and women who had sacrificed so much, making sure they knew their service was valued. At Great Lakes Naval Base, new recruits who had barely begun their training described the band's visit as one of the highlights of their experience. These moments weren't just concerts. They were a chance for troops to take a break, sing along, and feel connected to something beyond their daily routines. Sinise's commitment to the military didn't stop with the band. In 2011, he launched the Gary Sinise Foundation, expanding his efforts to support veterans, first responders, and their families. The foundation built specially adapted homes for severely wounded service members, provided customized vehicles for those with disabilities, and even sent families of fallen soldiers on trips to Disney World. Despite all of these initiatives, Sinise still saw music as one of the most powerful ways to bring people together. His concerts weren't just performances. They were acts of gratitude, moments of unity, and reminders that no matter where service members were stationed, they were never alone. After Forrest Gump in 1994, Gary Sinise proved he was more than just Lieutenant Dan. He took on roles that challenged him, made an impact, and kept him at the top of his game. In 1995, he played astronaut Ken Mattingly in Apollo 13, a gripping story about the near-disastrous NASA mission. His character had been pulled from the flight due to concerns about illness, but instead of fading into the background, he became a key part of the rescue effort. The film was a massive success, earning over $355 million worldwide and receiving 9 Academy Award nominations. His performance captured the quiet frustration of a man forced to watch from the sidelines, turning what could have been a minor role into one of the film's most compelling parts. That same year, Sinise took on another real-life figure in HBO's Truman, playing President Harry S. Truman. His portrayal was so convincing that it won him a Golden Globe for Best Actor in a miniseries or motion picture made for television. He continued his streak of powerful performances in George Wallace, 1997, taking on the role of the controversial Alabama governor. The film explored Wallace's rise in politics, his infamous segregationist stance, and his eventual transformation after an assassination attempt left him paralyzed. Sinise's performance was intense and deeply layered, earning him a Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actor in a miniseries or movie. He had a rare ability to bring historical figures to life, making them feel complex and human, rather than just characters in a script. In 1999, he reunited with Tom Hanks in The Green Mile, a film based on Stephen King's novel. The movie followed the lives of prison guards on death row, centering around a mysterious inmate with supernatural abilities. The film grossed over $286 million worldwide and received 4 Academy Award nominations. Though Sinise had a smaller role, his presence added another layer to an already powerful story. By the early 2000s, television was becoming a bigger platform for major actors, and Sinise found his place in one of the most successful franchises of the time. In 2004, he took on the role of Detective Mac Taylor in CSY New York. His character was tough but deeply moral, a man shaped by personal loss. The show revealed that Mac's wife had died in the September 11th attacks, giving his character an emotional weight that resonated with viewers. For 9 seasons and 197 episodes, Sinise was the steady force at the center of the show. His performance made Mac Taylor one of the most memorable characters in the CSI universe, helping the series stand out from the rest of the franchise. In recent years, he took on selective roles, playing Special Agent Jack Garrett in Criminal Minds, Beyond Borders, 2016 to 2017, and Dr. Robert Ellman in Netflix's 13 Reasons Why, 2020. He also wrote a memoir, Grateful American, A Journey from Self to Service, which detailed his journey from Hollywood to a life of giving back. Meanwhile, Gary Sinise and Moira Harris have been together for over 40 years, something rare in Hollywood. They first met at Illinois State University while studying acting. Their love story had its ups and downs. At one point, they planned a wedding and sent out invitations, but Moira got cold feet, and they called it off. They found their way back to each other and got married later that same year in 1981. Moira Harris was born on April 19, 1954, in Pontiac, Illinois. She built a strong acting career of her own, appearing in Of Mice and Men, which Gary directed, as well as Tall Tale and the TV series The Equalizer. She eventually stepped away from acting in 2003, but made a brief return to the stage in 2013. Her journey was not without struggles. In the 1990s, she battled alcohol addiction. After a stay in rehab in 1997, she became sober and has remained alcohol-free ever since. They built a life together and raised 3 children. Sophie was born in 1988. McKenna Anthony, known as Mac, was born in 1990, and Ella followed in 1992. Their family was hit with tragedy when Mac passed away in 2024. Through every challenge, their marriage remained strong. Sinise often credits Moira's Irish humor as the secret to their lasting bond. He has said she makes him laugh every single day. Their shared values also deepened over time. In 2000, Moira converted to Catholicism, strengthening the faith that already played a central role in their lives. Outside of acting, Sinise became known for his dedication to veterans and conservative causes. In 2005, he founded Friends of Abe, a networking group for conservatives in Hollywood. He has always supported the military and has been vocal about his views. In 2006, his name appeared in a Los Angeles Times advertisement condemning Hamas and Hezbollah while supporting Israel in the Lebanon conflict. In 2011, he spoke at the centennial celebration of Ronald Reagan's birth and narrated the virtual tour for the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. His political involvement sparked speculation over the years. In 2009, Nicole Wallace, a former advisor to George W. Bush and John McCain, suggested he could be a strong Republican candidate for president in 2012. While he donated to Mitt Romney's campaign that year, he made it clear where he drew the line. Despite being a longtime Republican supporter, he refused to endorse Donald Trump in 2016. He also criticized Trump's comments about John McCain, particularly when Trump questioned McCain's status as a war hero because he had been captured during the Vietnam War. His dedication to service has been recognized in many ways. In 2015, the West Point Association of Graduates honored him with the Sylvanus Thayer Award, an award given to non-graduates who exemplify the values of the U.S. Military Academy. In 2020, the Location Managers Guild presented him with a humanitarian award for his work with the Gary Sinise Foundation. When he accepted the award, he quoted President Calvin Coolidge, saying, "The nation which forgets its defenders will itself be forgotten." Through decades of marriage, a successful career, and a deep commitment to giving back, Gary Sinise has built a legacy that reaches far beyond Hollywood. His dedication to his family and his service to others continue to define his life.